Of course I'm happy. Of course I'm fulfilled. Of course I have everything I need. Of course I have all the resources that I require. Of course opportunities just show up for me and land in my lap because I know myself as a powerful, infinite, divine creator. And I also know that as the divine creator, I never withhold anything for myself. Nature doesn't create from exclusion. Spirit isn't asking me to settle or play small. I was given the opportunity to play small and to experience limitation, lack, and scarcity so that I could learn through that. And hey, everybody, it's Amar. How are you? Happy May. My gosh, there's so much going on right now. I don't even know where to begin. One of the things that I know about my work and what I do is that fundamentally, I came here to live as an example of what it looks like to be the most fully expressed version of myself as the vessel for the divine spark. And what does that look like when I am showing up? Present and accounted for within myself, within my life, within my experience? What does it look like when I am taking total accountability for my choices, my actions, my words? What I know is that total freedom requires total responsibility, personal responsibility. I know myself as the creator. I know myself as the divine impulse moving through this individuated experience that I call Amar. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers and a lot of new followers over the past couple of months, which I'm really excited about, and I'm super glad that you're here. Welcome. Consider this to be your official welcome. And so, for those of you who are new, those of you who haven't been following me for very long, you may or may not know that last July in 2024, I moved back to the small town in Wyoming where I grew up and moved in with my father, who's been having some health issues. He's in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and he needed help. He needed someone to come help him get his life in order, get everything organized and situated so that he could begin the transition into assisted living. That was last July when I moved here. Fast forward almost 10 months later, and we are finally at the moment where we are transitioning him into assisted living, and that's going to be happening in the next week or two. Personally, this has been one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life. Just the act of coming in here and essentially taking charge of my dad's situation financially, his financial situation, his health situation, his estate. Basically, I'm in charge of everything. It has been one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And just that in and of itself would be enough. Anybody who has ever been a caretaker for a parent understands how challenging and how difficult it is. But add to that all of the energy that we've been going through over the past couple of years. Add to that my own personal stuff. Add to that my own personal issues with my father, and realizing what was unresolved and what within me still needed love, acceptance, healing, and release and integration. It has brought up a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't even know existed. So suffice it to say, where I have been has been this seeming non-stop challenge, this non-stop, like having my face just shoved in my issues over and over and over. How deep does my compassion run? How unconditional is my love actually? How can I be sympathetic and empathetic and patient and kind in those moments, especially in those moments when I just want to unleash and burn it all down and jump in the car and drive away and never come back? Anyway, I've been having this really, really fascinating experience moving back to the hometown where I grew up, which I kind of swore that I would never return to. Growing up here was not an easy time for me. It was not necessarily a happy time for me. It was a very powerful time. It was a very formative time. It was a very, did I say formative? A very formative time, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't really joyful. Honestly, I couldn't wait to leave. The day that I graduated, I got a part-time job at a gas station down the street here, and I worked for the summer to save up money. I moved to Seattle when I was 18, and I never looked back. I think, in fact, I swore that I would never return here, and yet here I am, back in the town where my origin story began. Needless to say, the grace and the humor and the irony with which this has all gone down is not lost on me at all. Spirit has an incredible sense of irony and an incredible sense of humor. And one of the most powerful things that I have gotten out of my time here not only has been making peace with my dad, making peace with my relationship with him, my relationship with myself as it pertains to him, but just finding a place where I have been able to look at the situation from an objective point of view and actually laugh at the absurdity of it all. So there's been this really, really interesting thing. I've had this vision and this dream for my future, for what I'm building, for where I'd like to go, for what I'd like to do for quite some time now. And this time spent here in Wyoming, at first glance, I was like, this is the opposite of what I want. This is standing in the way of everything that I really, really want. At the time when I decided to come back here and then realized how much work there was to do, I was really, really angry and I was really, really resentful. I spent a lot of time resisting and denying and trying to escape and trying to avoid and just trying to get it done and get it over with so that I can move on with my life. And I've been pushing so hard over the past 10 months to get my dad to the place where he is ready to go into assisted living, to give him the support and the help that he needs because he can't care for himself. And it's just taken a whole lot longer than I thought it was going to. And just last week, we finally signed the lease. It was official. And I found myself in this place where I was like, I feel like it should be much more of a culmination. I feel like there should be a climax, this primary goal that I have been moving towards and pushing towards and focusing on and redirecting everything to, which was to get him in to assisted living, has finally been achieved. And yet all I felt was exhaustion. All I felt was depletion. All I felt was a sense of like, oh my God, there's still so much to do. And yet at the same time, almost parallel to this, has been this version of reality opening up to me and starting to call me forward the details and the components and the resources that I need to move into this next phase is also happening. So on one hand, it's like I have one foot in the old world, which has been about tying up loose ends, been about completing soul contracts, been about resolving things that needed to be resolved so that I could move into my new reality and make peace and let go of the old chapter. At the same time, the new reality, the new version of life, the new version of self, the timeline jump that I made a couple of months ago has also been going on. And it's this crazy, often overwhelming, often bewildering, oftentimes nonsensical, and just like what the WTF experience of phasing in and out of different realities. One moment I'm rooted into the old world, the old reality, the old stuff, the old identity. And then with a snap of a finger, the next moment I'm in the new reality, the new experience, the new world, the new version of self. And I found myself kind of flipping and flopping back and forth for quite some time now. And this has been slowly ramping up, and the speed has been increasing, and the intensity has been increasing. And now I find myself very clearly on this very rapid trajectory into the new reality, into the new timeline, while at the same time making peace with and continuing to let go of the old stuff. I know I'm not alone in this experience of feeling like I'm kind of in two worlds at the same time. And from one minute to the next, it's anybody's guess as to which one that I'm in. And honestly, the only way that I'm ever really able to know and be clear on, okay, is this about building the new reality right now? Or is this about letting go of the old reality right now? And the truth is that I'm doing both of them simultaneously kind of all of the time. And it's only really a matter of where my focus and awareness needs to be to really allow myself to completely release the old stuff, completely claim the new reality and move into it and begin to inhabit that reality full time permanently as a way of being and as a way of living. What I attribute a lot of this to, and I started talking about this way back in like 2022 or 23 when I was talking about the dissension of the higher self and this ocean of self that began to really, really ramp up its intensity around August of 2023. And what I was talking about and what I'm continuing to see is the dissension of the higher self, the dissension of the expanded self into the physical form, while the physical form is also ascending. So there's been a dissension of the higher aspects and an ascension of the human self, the limited aspects, and they've continued to merge and to blend. And what's happening is the higher self is creating a much bigger and a much more powerful impact all of the time. It's been a very slow, deliberate ramp up, but I definitely feel like we're past the halfway mark, right? So it's like 51% higher self energy, 49% lower self energy or limited self energy, just to give a simple equation. And the frequency of the higher self is much, much more powerful. It's got a much greater influence on the reality now. And this blending of your frequencies will eventually tune out the frequency of the lower self because it's simply more powerful. It's like having a teeny tiny little radio or a teeny tiny little speaker next to a gigantic amplifier or like a wall of speakers, the one that's louder and more powerful and of a more potent frequency is just going to drown out the other one over time. Eventually, that's just what's going to happen. Another thing that's happening right now is for a long time, we were flipping and flopping back between old timelines and new timelines. We were in the old world, we were in the new world, and we would kind of go back and forth. The wave, if you want to think of a sine wave, the wave was much, much bigger, right? So the times when we would dip down into the lower frequency were much more, I guess, gentle, and we spent a lot more time there. And then as the wave would peak, it was much more gentle, and we would spend a lot more time up in the higher frequency, and on it would go. So it was like a really slow moving wave. Now the wave is moving much, much faster. So the peaks are much, much higher, the troughs are much, much lower, and the amount of time that we are spending in each one is speeding up and getting much, much shorter, because eventually this is going to create a compression breakthrough where you just pop up into the new reality, because the momentum that has been built by that oscillation of the wave going back and forth, it's speeding up energy, and it's creating this almost like pulling back a slingshot or pulling back the rubber band, creating a tremendous amount of tension, and then it gets released, and then you're just shot into the new reality. The reason that this has become so important is because the amount of energy required to go into the higher expanded state where you're in the higher self mentality, you're in the cosmic mind, you're in the 30,000 foot view perspective, and you can see clearly where you are from the higher perspective, observing your lower self perspective, and the amount of energy that it took to expand yourself and then to minimize yourself and go back into the old reality, that creates or that takes a tremendous amount of energy. The bounce back that's required to go from low self, old self, historical self, limited self to free self, eternal self, liberated self, expanded self, that's a ton of energy. And it's not something that is sustainable. It was a mechanism of our experience and of our journey, this back and forth and the tension that that created. That was necessary so that we could continue to build the momentum that would really launch us into the higher timeline and into the timeline jump. But we can't do it forever, because that's just a tremendous drain on our resources and our energy. And the body, frankly, just is at the point where it's saying, okay, we need to decide, we need to pick, we need to choose. And this is also what I've been talking about the division of realities and the splitting of the timelines, is the higher self, the physical self, the emotional self, the energetic self, and the human are all kind of collectively coming together and saying, okay, yeah, we are doing the ascension thing this lifetime. Ascension is happening while we're in the physical reality. We're doing the new earth thing. And so at some point, we just have to say, okay, we can no longer spend time, energy, and resources on the old reality. That's why it becomes increasingly uncomfortable to navigate and inhabit the old self, the historical self, the traumatized, wounded self. It creates a tremendous amount of tension and push and pull, and we're moving out of that phase. We have done the work to reach into the higher frequency and into the higher timeline and to stay there. Yes, there might still be a little bit of finesse and a little bit of attention that the old stuff needs, but more and more, that is just going to continue to diminish and recede into the rearview mirror. I talked about this in the April update about the resurrection timeline and about what's happening with the rebirth of the self as we go through these moments of integration, these moments of healing and release and collapse, and the old self continues to die. And then we've created an empty space essentially within us, and then more of that higher light can pour in, and we begin to integrate and to assimilate that higher frequency. That raises the bar, continues to raise the bar as we go. And so essentially, it's like climbing a ladder. The rung that you are reaching for will inevitably become the rung that you are standing on. You just need to keep climbing. And part of why this happens is quite simply it comes down to desire. Desire is causative. What I mean by that is the desire for something, for anything, in a creative, generative reality like the one that we live in, where every thought word, and action creates a ripple or a wave in the field. So the desire for something immediately creates a wave in the field. These waves begin to emanate from your core and from your center, and they move out into the field and they activate or begin to activate the manifestation of that desire. Some waves don't create a lot, right? It's like throwing a penny in a pond. It's just a small little ripple. It doesn't create much. It's the passing thought. It's the passing fancy of like, oh, what about that? Or, ooh, that might be cool. Or that might be nice. It's just a moment. It's a blip. It's a blink. And so those waves aren't really big and they aren't really powerful. And they usually die or recede just as quickly as they begin to emerge. So some waves don't create much, but some waves create a much more powerful impact. And that's like throwing a boulder into that same pond. The ripples are going to be much bigger, they're going to be much more dramatic, and they're going to have a much greater effect on the surrounding field of water or the field of energy. So it's like throwing a boulder into the pond. And as you focus on what you want to experience and you continue to pour your energy, awareness, and your frequency into that desire, it starts to form, it starts to manifest. It also starts to send out waves. So now you have the waves of desire coming out from your center that begins to create something essentially outside of you or what you perceive outside of you, another point in the field of energy. And then that over time begins to coalesce and gain mass and gain form. And then it begins to send out ripples. So you have your ripples coming out from your center, you have the ripples coming out from your desire. And at some point, in order for you to manifest it, the waves must match frequency. Essentially, this is the truth that we know. The key to any manifestation is that in order to receive what you desire, you must become a match to the vibration of it. You must be able to embody it. And the more you embody it, then it begins to work its way into your cellular memory, your muscle memory, your neural pathways, and even your DNA. So then you literally become the very thing that you are desiring because it's all vibration anyway. It's the frequency of the thing that you desire that we are paying attention to. So essentially, as you're phasing in and out of the old reality and the new reality, it's what's called phase locking. And phase locking is essentially you become the match with the frequency of what you desire. So it's a technique of synchronization. So the phase of your desired reality is out here coming towards you as you continue to manifest it. The phase of what you desire continues to move out and strengthen and create the mass of that manifestation. And over time, what we see is that these output signals and the input signal, what you're sending out and what you're receiving back, must match. And that is how you maintain and create a synchronization of frequencies. And once that happens, then you're in the new reality. You're a match for it. You become the embodiment of it. And over time, you actually become the version of yourself that can inhabit that reality. But what happens is if you are not at the frequency of what you desire, it just creates interference and dissonance, which creates discomfort. It creates, it triggers old stuff. It triggers old wounds. It triggers old memories or old historical realities. And the reason that it does that is to clear it out of you. My guides told me this years ago. They said, in this reality, the minute that you desire something, the path to it is instantaneously opened and you begin to call it towards you. Where most people fall apart is that, let's say you say, I want $1 million. Okay, boom. The reality of you having that kind of money and that kind of financial resources is instantaneously opened and begins to create itself and call you towards it. But if you don't believe that you can have it, if you don't believe that it's possible, if you don't believe that that you're worthy of it, you are never going to allow yourself to have it. So what happens is the higher self begins to call to you the experiences, the people, and the circumstances that will clear you of the things that are not a match to that frequency. From the higher self, the soul perspective, you understand that desire is causative. You understand that simply desiring something or thinking about it can instantaneously create it in a higher frequency. But we're dealing with density down here in the lower frequency frequencies, and lower isn't worse or better. It's not about good or bad. It's just about the vibration of something. Again, the sine wave in a lower frequency is much slower. The undulation, the peak and the valley is much, much slower. And as you raise your vibration and your frequency, then that wave gets faster and faster. You know this as a soul. The human is the one that holds the trauma, holds the wounds, holds the beliefs and the perspectives and the stories that limit you from having what you really truly are, what you really truly desire. So phase locking, as you're flipping and flopping between the old reality and the new reality, is essentially your energy within you, your frequency that you're emanating, becoming a match with the frequency of the reality that's calling you forward. All of that is preparing you to thrive and survive and exist within the reality. So essentially, you ask for something, the higher self begins to open the path to it. And again, where most of us falter is we say, well, I want $1 million. And now all of a sudden I'm dealing with all this scarcity and all of this lack. Yeah, it's so that you can move through the beliefs and the patterns and see where you still hold the concepts of scarcity and lack within you so that you can clear them and they will no longer create interference with the field of energy that is calling you forward, saying, hey, the dream of the vision of the reality that you have, it's over here, but you're not going to be able to hang out there until you clear all the stuff that holds you back. So here's the question to ask yourself right now. What elements are required for me to inhabit the reality I desire? That is the most crucial thing to begin to focus on. What elements are required for me to inhabit this reality? If I am in the reality where I am successful and have all the things that I need, all the resources that I need, all the abundance, the love, the community, the relationships, all of that stuff, I need to become the version of myself that can hang there. I need to become the version of Amar that sees that as a sustainable reality. I essentially need to become the version of self that goes, well, of course I'm happy. Of course I'm fulfilled. Of course I have everything I need. Of course I have all the resources that I require. Of course opportunities just show up for me and land in my lap because I know myself as a powerful, infinite, divine creator. And I also know that as the divine creator, I never withhold anything for myself. Nature doesn't create from exclusion. Spirit isn't asking me to settle or play small. I was given the opportunity to play small and to experience limitation, lack, and scarcity so that I could learn through that and realize, like, oh, okay, right? It's like the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy had the ruby slippers on the whole time. She could have gone home at any time, but she needed the journey of challenge and difficulty and scary monsters and, the Wicked Witch. She needed to go through that journey so that she could realize her power. But the point of it is her power was always there. She just didn't believe it. So it is often this suffering and the obstacles and the difficulty that give us something to overcome. And from our human perspective, especially in a polar reality like the third dimension, where it's light and dark, good and bad, up and down, push and pull, we need something to push against so that we can regain our strength. We need something to overcome so that we can see, wow, look how powerful I really am. If it wasn't hard to lift 100-pound bench press, you would never rise to the occasion. You would never go through the experience of, wow, 6 months ago I started at 25 pounds and then I slowly worked my way up and built my strength and built my muscles. And now I'm able and capable of pushing 100 pounds away from me. Easy peasy. I can do that. That's not hard at all. And here is why. It's because of the mind. The mind's primary function is to create coherence between the internal experience and the external experience. And when the mind isn't consciously directed, it is always going to go into default creation mode. And default creation mode, for the most part, is always rooted in your history. The mind cannot create beyond the present moment. The mind only has access to history. The mind is essentially an archive. And so when you're standing at the threshold of the precipice of something you've never experienced before, and you are not consciously and deliberately directing your focus, especially your mental focus, the mind is always going to say, well, we've never done this before, or the last time you had $100,000, you just blew it, or the last time you were in a relationship, you were unhappy, or the last time you had a big opportunity, you weren't able to succeed. And so the mind is always going to refer to your history. The mind is always only going to be able to access history. So when you are seeing dissonance or incoherence between what you want and what you have, the number one way for you to move through that is through the heart, through the cosmic mind, through the deeper layers of self and the more expanded layers of spirit. The answer is never found in the mind because, again, the mind only knows how to create from history. So the mind only has access to the memories of when you didn't have it, when you were having difficulty, when you were struggling, when you were sick, when you were unhappy. And if the mind doesn't have any frame of reference for what it is to be healthy, balanced, and thriving, it's never going to be able to create it. So you have to begin to focus and direct the mind. That's why your inner work is so important. So you can watch the mind. Oh, look, I have an opportunity to move outside of my comfort zone and make some really amazing content or make a really big impact or make a lot of money or move into the next level of my career or my relationship. But if I'm looking at those opportunities through the mind is going to say, oh, you don't know how to do that. Oh, no, that's impossible. No, you're not capable of, you're not strong enough. You're not big enough. You're not smart enough. You're not good looking enough or whatever. So if you are not consciously directing the mind, it is always going to go into default mode, and default mode is always rooted in history. That's why mental choices are going to be really short lived, especially now. Anything that is coming from the historical story, I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm in pain, I'm wounded, I'm insecure, I'm shy, I'm awkward, I'm embarrassed, I'm unstable, I'm unhealthy, I'm whatever. When you are creating from that old story, you're creating from a version of yourself that really doesn't exist anymore, except for in the history of the mind. Essentially, to the higher self, the past never happened. The higher self never sees itself as limited by what has happened in an incarnation. It only ever sees itself as supported by that knowledge, right? So when you are using the mind to create, it's not going to get very far, especially in the current energies and the current frequencies right now, because this is all about heart based choices and heart based action. And the reason that the heart is so powerful is number one, its electromagnetic field is far, far bigger and far more powerful than the one of the brain. The heart is also the portal to the expanded self, the higher self, the true self. So heart based choices are also linked to service in some way. And the number one most powerful way that you can really create an impact and really speed up the manifestation of something is to root it into service. How can I help? How can I illuminate? How can I show? How can I guide? How can I assist? How can I serve? Because that's what the higher self is built for. That's what the human is built for. We were built to be of service to one another, to nature, to the planet, to the cosmos. That is the power of the human, is when we tap into compassion and love and kindness and patience and inclusion, when we tap into those generative, coherent frequencies, and a coherent frequency is something that brings things together. Something that is not coherent or that is disintegrated breaks them apart and separates them. So when you are moving from the heart, you are creating something that is far greater than you as an individual, because it is always going to include all of creation and take all of that into consideration, as opposed to the mind, which is always coming from fear or separation or comparison, or I have this and you don't, I'm better, you're worse, whatever. So the mind is always going to be about dividing and separating you from your experience, because that's the function of the mind. The mind looks out here, takes an assessment of what's going on. It looks in here, takes an assessment of what is going on, and it's going to try to bring the two to a phase lock. So if you are experiencing really exciting, wonderful things out here, but you don't believe that you're capable or worthy of them, you are always going to deny or destroy them when you're creating through the mind, because the mind says, nope, that's not possible. We can't be happy. That's not who we are. So I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that that is not available to you, because it's not real. It's not true. It's not sustainable. sustainable or supportable. So you've got to find a way to acknowledge what the mind is showing you and telling you, and then tap into a deeper level of wisdom and a higher level of awareness and create from there. Essentially, where you are right now is you are being given an opportunity to ask this question and answer this question of yourself. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the old story of limitation and lack and struggle and suffering and misery, is that what you want? Is it worth it? Is the payoff that you get from navigating your life through that lens, through that belief system, is that giving you what you want? Is it worth it? The other side of that question is it worth it for you to move beyond the comfort zone? Is it worth it to you to feel a little uncomfortable or feel a little awkward or feel a little outside of your depth or ask for help or ask for support or open yourself up to receive? The answer to that is always yes. It's always worth it. But again, if you're using the mind as your means of navigating through the world, you are just going to continue to butt up against dead end after dead end after dead end because mental choices are the weakest choices that you have access to. Creations that are only happening from the mind are the weakest choices and creations that you can make. They're really, really short-lived. They're not super powerful. The mind thinks that it is much more grandiose than it actually is. It's the heart and the expanded self, which is accessed through the heart, is where all the juice lies. So I want to show you this image real quick. And this is what most of us would call a Venn diagram. It's also the Vesica Piscis or Vesica Piscis. And what we see here are these two spheres that are overlapping, and we're not really sure. Are they moving apart? Are they separating, or are they coming together? There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this image. So if we look at it from here, think of this as the higher reality, this is the lower reality, and you have just been phasing in and out of the lower reality. You're currently kind of in the middle where you're overlapping. The new world is not quite formed and the old world is not quite gone, but you're still kind of in the middle. And as these two spheres continue to separate and move apart, the new bubble, the new timeline, the new reality will continue to call you upward and forward and outward. And over time, continuing to surrender and allow yourself to go through this process, also staying in the heart and choosing from that level of understanding and frequency. This is what is going to lock you into this higher frequency and this higher reality. Another thing we can look at here is you could call this the past and you could call this the future. So you may, like where I have been with my dad, is I was absolutely in the past. There was a whole lot of unresolved stuff that I didn't even know was a part of my reality or still kind of kicking around within my field and within my body. So I had to kind of go back to the past. I had to go back to an old relationship. I had to go back to an old state of being. I had to go back to an old identity to clear up all the stuff that I hadn't cleared up in my relationship with my dad. And as I have done that, I have moved into this inner space, this middle portion where I'm kind of 1 foot in the old, 1 foot in the new. But again, continuing to understand that anything that feels difficult or challenging is only here to allow me another opportunity to clear it and release it, let it go, or integrate it so that the heaviness won't be weighing me down anymore. It's like the hot air balloon. You just got to cut away the sandbags. And as I do that, then this old reality just fades away. And the new reality just sort of effortlessly kind of pulls me into it. And it's like a bubble that's like bloop. And before I know it, I popped into the new reality. But I just so happen to be kind of in the middle right now. So this is where I see a lot of us collectively and individually, we're going through this process. And it can be really disorienting because 1 minute you think like, oh yeah, I'm in it, I'm feeling it, it's good, it's golden, it's exactly what I want, it's what I've always dreamed of, what I've always hoped for, what I've always wished for. And then bam, 2 seconds later, you're triggered or you're activated or something from the old reality kind of pulls you into it. That's not necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong or that you're not getting it. It's just that there's an old thing that still needs a little bit of your love and attention. And I say this all the time, the only reason anything ever repeats in your experience is because you have new information about it. So when you go into this higher reality, when you go into the future timeline, you learn and expand and you grow. You create more wisdom, you access more compassion, you find more empathy. Then the old self says, oh, perfect. Amar's at a point now where he can see this and love this and heal or release this in a way that he's never been able to before. So the new information that you have comes from those higher frequencies. And when the old lower frequencies suddenly seems like it it has sucked you back into its orbit, it's only because you can now bring a deeper level of compassion, a more expanded version of love, a more understanding or patient or kind perspective, whatever the thing is. And the more you are able to bring the higher frequency into the older reality, the faster the old reality is going to collapse because the frequency of the old reality can't hang with the frequency of the higher reality, right? It's like if you've ever seen, when they use a sonic wave, or they take a really high pitched sound or a frequency and they direct it at a wine glass or something glass, it shatters the glass because the glass is of a lower frequency. Density is just a lower vibration, right? It's slower. And then you bring in this really high pitched noise or this high pitched sound that's much higher frequency, it shatters the glass because the glass can't keep up with it from a vibrational perspective. It's the same thing with your life right now. The higher reality, the higher version of you will over time obliterate the old identity and the old reality. That's essentially what healing is it's letting go and allowing the old things to collapse and to dissolve so that the true self can emerge from behind all of the stuff that was standing in the way. And you just have to allow the higher frequency to come in and show you where you need to do your work, show you where you need to focus, and offer your love and support to yourself unconditionally. And the more you do that, the faster the old reality collapses. I hope that this helps you make sense of what's happening right now. I know it just feels overwhelming. I know it just feels like there's not even a moment to breathe right now. And personally speaking, that's where I am. It just seems like no matter where I turn, no matter where I focus, something is asking for the clearest, most connected, most conscious and deliberate version of myself. And to be honest, that's the version of self that I'm ultimately going to be inhabiting anyway, because nowhere in the vision for the new reality or the expanded reality that I'm moving into, nowhere in that reality is there a vision of me being limited or being insecure or being stuck in a time loop of wounded, traumatic suffering, being stuck in an old version of reality of limitation and lack and challenge and difficulty and scarcity. We really are at the point where, as these timelines continue to separate, where we are being called to choose. Which door are you going to walk through? Which version of yourself are you going to inhabit? And to take you back to that question, what elements are required for me to inhabit this reality? That is your task. That is your goal. That is your mission and your focus. And that is what you are already becoming because it's what you already are. Thank you for watching. I love you. Have a great month.